What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and today I'll be continuing our Shadowlands Pre Patch Preparations series. In this episode, I'll cover some of the items you should keep on you, as well as a couple tips and tricks you might want to consider. With that out of the way, let's start cleaning up our bags, stocking up on goodies, and maybe getting an add-on or two so we can save ourselves a load of headache in the future. With a pre-patch build hitting the PTR this week, there's a pretty high likelihood we'll be looking at a Shadowlands release a lot sooner than I originally anticipated. I was originally going to make this series a little closer to the actual release date, but I figured these would be some good tips and ideas you can start thinking about ahead of time. This is basically the exact list of things I do when getting ready for an expansion launch, so if you have any other ideas or pointers for people, feel free to bring it up in the comments below, because the more we know, the better. And I'm kinda a total hamster brain with some things, so I might completely forget something to mention, so yeah, that too. One of the most important things to keep track of while leveling is your bag space. As you've probably seen from leveling in the past, there's a lot of random crap these NPCs keep on them. Half-chewed bones, soggy meat sacks, rotten apples, stuffed animals, you name it, these mobs have stuff stuffed into their grody pockets. Even when they don't have pockets. Ew. So the problem is, from all the quest rewards and random tchotchkes and stuff you'll come across as you venture through the Shadowlands, you kinda need room in your bags to put them all. So every time before an expansion launch, I clear out as much of my bags as possible. This means putting away some of my random items that I've just been holding on to as well. For example, I normally have over a dozen different teleportation items on me, so my more obscure ones, like the ring that takes me to Karazhan or the Timeless Isle trinket, yeah, they go into my bank storage for like a day or two while I'm leveling. I also try to use this time as a spring cleaning event for my bank, which has gotten stuffed like Gallywix on tax day over the last couple expansions, because I'm a pack rat. But yeah, I would recommend going pretty minimalistic on the teleportation items you keep in your bags. If you haven't deleted your Hearthstone yet, then you can do that if you have a toy version to use instead, since you don't need the original one if you have the toy copy. You can also keep like a guild cloak or two, and then wear the Baradin's Warden's Tabard or Hellscream's Reach Tabard, since you really won't need to be going back to your capital city that often while leveling, but you never know when something random or buggy could happen. Also, you'll want to set your hearth location to Oribos basically as soon as you get there for the first time, as you'll be doing a fair amount of back and forth traveling for every time you complete a zone. The more space you can free up, the better, because this will also keep you from having to waste time with vendoring items or mailing things to alts or something. If you ever do find yourself in a sticky situation in terms of bag space though, I do recommend having the Katie Stamp Whistle toy, as this will let you pop a mailbox out and you can shove a bunch of random crap at one of your alts to gather later, if you're somewhere that you just can't vendor stuff at the moment. If you don't know how to get the Katie Stamp Whistle toy, I'll link a video, because I did one on it a little while ago showing how to get it. It's a really useful toy to have. Speaking of bag space, I also recommend having at least 30 slot bags on you. On my realm at least, deep sea bags have dropped to an incredibly low price point, like 100 gold level cheap. But people may start to bump prices up to try and make a bit more profit as people get ready for Shadowlands, so this is something to consider. If you have 32 slot bags, then that's even better, because every space adds up. On the topic of looting to fill these bags, this is a quick shout out to the add-on Faster Loot by Xarano. I'll leave a link to it in the description though. Basically, all it does, if you're using auto loot, is makes the pop-up window go away immediately, which causes the loot to basically instantly end up in your bags. This saves quite a lot of time over the course of however long you're playing, though if you aren't using the auto loot feature, this won't do anything for you. Just a quick tidbit of information, since this is an add-on I found a little while back that's pretty simple and useful, just the way I like it. I'll avoid mentioning any other specific add-ons, as I can't really guarantee which ones will/won't work by the time launch occurs, but this one's good to keep in mind. Okay, so now for the really useful stuff. Consumables. These are things I highly recommend having on you, as they can shave off a lot of time and headache in certain areas. First and foremost, the ever-popular Goblin Glider Kits. You probably won't need too many of these, but there are some areas in each of the zones where they'll come in handy. Revendreth is probably the best place for using these, as most of the castles and buildings are just very high up in comparison to the topography of the zone. You can craft these yourself if you have an engineering hut in your Draenor garrison, or you can pay some charming engineer type folks on the auction house for them. Most of these types of items do go up in price as the expansion is closer to launching, so you might want to just grab like 20 to 40 of these ahead of time. You probably won't need more than a dozen anyways, but extras never hurt. Another engineering consumable I highly recommend is the Gunshoes. I've done a couple videos in the past covering engineering items, but these are nice because once again you don't have to be an engineer to use them. These give a 200% run speed increase for 25 seconds, which is by far the longest speed buff of any movement item in the game. You can't use them if you're in combat though, but once you strap a pair of Winchesters onto your feet, there is nothing stopping you, literally. Even if you get hit or dazed, you don't dismount from the Gunshoes. So these are amazing for covering long distances or getting through heavy mob areas if you just want to get by. Oh, and you can use these while in stealth, so yeah, stupid OP. These do have a 3-minute cooldown, however they do not share a cooldown with movement speed potions or other things like that, so yeah, these are definitely great to have. The only downside is you can't use these while indoors, which is kinda lame, but I still love these frickin' things. There are also movement speed potions and invisibility potions, such as the Lightfoot potion and Dimitri's Draught of Deception. However, there is something to consider when using these. Blizzard has put all DPS and utility potions on the same 5-minute cooldown, and this cooldown is not something that's affected by starting or ending combat. So no matter what, once you hit one of these utility potions or DPS potions, it's a 5-minute cooldown for all of them, so just keep that in mind. You could also use things like the Draenic Invisibility potion or Skystep potion. However, as of now, it's most likely you'll be able to get the current expansion versions for cheaper than the older ones. For damage-oriented consumables, you can still use any of the Bloodlust/Heroism drums, though they're slightly weaker than they were before. Drums now only give a 15% haste bonus, down from 25%. Some of the beefier boss-type enemies you fight might call for a little extra damage though, so having some of these wouldn't hurt. If you want a really cheap way to make some, you can do so through your Draenor garrison if you have one. You'll need the tannery hut and a bunch of raw beast hide, which is pretty cheap nowadays, and these drums, even buying them, are still basically half the price of current expansion drums, so that's something to consider too. Now let's talk about food. I love food, especially food that helps me level faster. For food buffs, you could go about it a couple ways. If you want to just use whatever food you have from Battle for Azeroth, that's perfectly fine. Endgame food from Battle for Azeroth gives 14 to your secondary stat, which is a pretty okay amount. However, I'm personally going to be using Bear Tartar. If you don't remember it, this was a food buff from Legion that gave a massive speed increase when you killed anything, even critters. It has been since nerfed pretty hard. However, at level 50, it still gives a respectable 14% movement speed increase. So if you were one of the people using Longstride or Azerite traits for extra movement speed, those won't work in Shadowlands, so this might be enough to at least tide you over through the leveling process. As you level up, unfortunately this bonus will drop down. At level 60, Bear Tartar only gives a 9% movement speed increase, so it won't be quite as effective later in the leveling cycle, but it'll give you a smidge more speed in the beginning over other people, and since the leveling path is 100% linear in Shadowlands, that might be enough to get you ahead of the pack and not stuck waiting for random mobs to spawn for one of the many kill X number of people quests out there. Just something to consider. Being an engineer has a lot of leveling perks as well, but I imagine most people want to stick with their main professions for once they hit max level. If you aren't that attached to one of your professions though, it might be worthwhile to pick up engineering. It'll give you access to the Looterang, which lets you mass loot from long range, and with the faster loot add-on, it's crazy how quick you'll pick up everything around you. It also gives you access to the belt tinkering enchants, such as water walking or nitro boosts, which I highly recommend. Nitro boosts only has a 2-minute cooldown and can be used indoors, is infinite, unlike speed potions, and you'll end up using those and having a longer cooldown on them. There's plenty of awesome quality of life things to being an engineer, but these are just some of the more obvious or noteworthy things to consider. Most importantly, when it comes to preparing or actually participating in launch day of any expansion, have fun with it. Don't stress yourself out over getting to max level. It isn't going anywhere for at least 2 years, don't worry. I bring these recommendations up as a way of helping people know things that they could do if they want to reach max level a little more efficiently or faster, because I know there are people that no matter what just are not a fan of leveling. However, if you want to take your time and see everything and hear every line of dialogue, then go for it. Leveling doesn't have to be a mad dash to the end, so if that's not what you're looking for, then that's okay. I'm personally the type who will probably be doing this all in one sitting with maybe an hour or so break in there at some point, but that's just how I am with expansion launches, since I like getting into dungeons as early as possible. I hope these tips and tricks were useful to you folks. Let me know in the comments if you have any other suggestions for everyone that I didn't mention / forgot about entirely, as the likelihood of it being one of those two is pretty darn high. I have a few more things I'm testing on the beta still regarding preparations for pre-patch and launch, so there will likely be a part 3 to this pre-patch preparation series, as I'm probably gonna call it, because alliteration. I have plenty of other things I cover on the channel as well if you're new here, so feel free to stop by. I've started organizing most of the videos into playlists, so you should have a pretty good idea of the things I cover. Thank you all so much for watching, this is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.